War, politics, magic, amnesia. Let's dive in to Blight Crossing by D. Avraham. This book is about a man who basically has no memory of where he has come from, who he is, and he just wakes up on the side of a road. He's kind of a wanderer, and he gets taken in to become basically a farmhand for a woman who needs help on her farm. And as the story progresses, we come to find out that Blight, which is the name of the main character, is more than he seems. He has skills with weapons. He naturally has instincts to look around for guards and escape routes. So it has a very intriguing premise that really kept me engaged throughout the whole story. You get a little taste of like the day-to-day of this little village that he's a part of, but you also get POVs of like a larger scope of what's going on throughout various kingdoms and empires and conflicts. And you kind of get the sense that Blight might be involved in this greater scheme. And even though you don't really know who he is, and neither does he, so it really keeps that suspense and keeps that tension. Now, before we dive into this review, I just want to mention that the author reached out to me so that he could give all of my viewers an offer. So I just want to let you all know about that now, and I'll leave a link in the description below. But he basically said that anyone that follows the link in my description can receive 3 books, a short story collection from the Souls Realm, which includes a prologue or 2 from Blight Crossing, a reference guide for Blight Crossing, and another novella, which is a creative fantasy interpretation of the biblical story of Ruth. And all you basically had to do is sign up for his email newsletter, and you get access to all of that great content. So again, if you want to do that, you can click on the link in the description. So with that context in mind, let's dive into this indie review. First up, let's talk about the Immersion, which I gave a 7.5 out of 10. I thought it was good, but I really didn't feel like we delved really deep into any of the topics that we brushed on throughout the story. So we got a little hint of like the different kingdoms and how they're structured, but that's pretty much it. They get brushed over a little bit. You get a hint of how the village and the city kind of interact with each other with their different cultures, which I liked a lot. You also get a sense of the politics going on and how different scheming parties are working against each other. But I do think, and I'll probably touch on this on the infrastructure section, that this was probably impacted by the writing style a little bit. I just felt like how it was written wasn't quite as immersive, where you're getting lost in the pages. It was very quick paced and very straightforward in the writing, which again, I was okay with, but I felt like it could have been more immersive with its world building. Next up, let's talk about the names. I gave the characters of this world an 8 out of 10. I did feel invested in them. Like I really cared about Blight especially. I thought he was a very interesting character. I loved the farm. I loved the boy and his mother. I also liked the main politician that was kind of manipulating things behind the scenes, and the soldiers that were part of that city. I thought that they were all very engaging. They had great motivation. They were all very believable. And they were just fun to read. Now, where I had some issues was sometimes the dialogue was a little bit flat for me, where it just didn't feel as realistic of something that they would say. Like Blight, for example, strikes me as someone who's a little bit more harsh and maybe doesn't need to say as much, which he does do a lot throughout the book. But like sometimes I feel like the conflicts were just resolved way too easily, and Blight wouldn't let certain things slide. Like especially at the end of the book, I felt like he let something slide. He didn't let it slide. There still were consequences there, but I feel like knowing this character, there would have been harsher consequences, and he wouldn't have cared what the repercussions would have been. But that's just my opinion. I think for the most part, the characters were pretty good. Now, the magic, I gave a 7 out of 10, and that's because I did feel like it was very interesting, especially once we started to learn how the magic worked with a lot of the geometric patterns and how they were able to access that to gain different powers. But we just don't get a lot of the magic throughout the story. Towards the end, you get a little bit more taste of the magic and how it's involved and woven through the story. You see how it how that's something that affected Blight's memory. You see how the elder of the village was trying to help him, and how he has just all this supreme knowledge of magic that he just is able to keep hidden. But yeah, just because there's not a ton of it. And then I really liked the magical concept behind the coalition that was formed between the king and the witch and the other guy that was part of that council, and then the two friends that were frozen but not killed in their state of like endless suffering, I guess. Was really interesting to see how that magic worked as well. So it was super interesting. I just think that we probably needed more of it, or maybe more explanation of it, or had it folded in a little bit more throughout the story. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. Now let's talk about the infrastructure. The infrastructure covers things like pacing, prose, plot, and so because it has a wide scope of what it covers, this one I gave a 6 out of 10. Now, the pacing was good. I enjoyed the pace of this story. I thought it moved very well. It moved quickly, kept me engaged throughout the whole thing. The prose was very basic and simple, very straightforward, where it was almost a narrative, like telling you what was going on, as opposed to like more of an immersive reading experience. I've seen in places that like there are tools where you can basically upload your text and see the rhythm of your story, and to make sure you have long sentences, medium sentences, and short sentences kind of spaced throughout the whole story. And to me, it kind of felt like it was a lot of short clipped sentences that really just, again, it kept the pace moving quickly, but it just almost felt flat from a just reading experience. So that kind of knocked it down a little bit. 2 is I did find several mistakes throughout the book. A few is okay, but especially for indie authors, but I do think maybe it could use one more round of edits. And then the third thing is the plot. The plot was so good and it moved so well. Again, the pacing wasn't an issue, but I personally felt like the ending was not a satisfying ending. It didn't feel like the story was concluded. It kind of felt like we got cut halfway through, or maybe like right before the climax, right before the rising action. And I personally didn't like that. I felt like we needed more of a resolution to the story, and it just kept building and building and building, and then it kind of left us on a cliffhanger. So I was not super happy with how it ended. Again, because I was invested in these characters, I was invested in the story, and then to just kind of have it end almost like after it was building to a climax, it just closed. I don't even feel like we ever reached the climax or the resolution. So I feel like we're missing two components of the story where everything else built well, but if you're missing the climax and the resolution, it just sucks some of that satisfaction away from the reading experience. So I still enjoyed it, but something to be aware of. And that leads me to my enjoyment score, which I gave an 8 out of 10. Again, I really actually liked this story. I liked the premise, which I thought was really unique, following this warrior, this incredible warrior that has amnesia, as he's just working on a farm and living day to day. Was just super interesting, unfolding that mystery of who is this guy, where did he come from, how is he involved in this story, especially when the other world elements were introduced to it. So I liked that a lot, and it did keep me very engaged. But again, I think the enjoyment score would have been higher if the ending was a little bit more satisfactory. But outside of that, I really enjoyed it. I think that I would recommend it even despite its flaws, because I thought that it was done well, and it was a unique story with a unique premise, and I think that it does have a lot of potential. I think that I saw on his website somewhere that he was writing the second book to this one. I don't know if it's done yet, but something to keep in mind. So I definitely think it needs a second book after everything that it went through, but yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. So that leaves Blight Crossing with an overall score of 7.3 out of 10. If you like more of a mystery vibe to your stories and a little bit of that intrigue of thriller and suspense, I think that this one is going to be a good one for you to read. And again, that second book I'm hoping for, because I do think that it is necessary before I can fully recommend it to people, because I don't want them to get mad at me based off of the ending of book 1. But I think it has a lot of potential, And so if you do want to read it, those are the considerations. Now it's time to judge the book by its cover. This was sent in to me as an ebook, so we're going to be working with this as our reference point. Now, I think it's an okay cover, but for me personally, I don't like Blight facing forward as much. It almost has I don't know how to describe it, but it almost feels like a historical book rather than a fantasy book, with the colors that it has, and the style of the person facing forward is a little too realistic as opposed to like artistic or illustrated. It looks like a picture of a person. So to me, I feel like maybe if his back was turned looking over his shoulder, something like that would be a little bit less intimidating, I guess. Maybe it works because Blight is an intimidating character, but I think what would have done better is, because Blight is so close to the cover, I think what would have been better is to have Blight standing again in the distance, maybe with the boy, to show the height difference, or standing next to a warrior so that you could see how much bigger Blight is, so that you could really showcase the intimidation factor of this man. But it's okay. It's not great. It's not bad. It's just somewhere in the middle. I think there's just some things you can do to enhance it, but again, it might just be my opinion. And that'll do it for today's book review. Remember, if you want to sign up for his email newsletter, you'll get access to some free books and novellas that he's written that you can read in tandem with this story. And if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, be sure to like and join the Indie Fantasy Club, this community of indie fantasy authors that we're building so that we can compete against trad publishing and just bring more of a spotlight to these wonderful indie fantasy authors. If you haven't already, check out some of my other indie fantasy book reviews, and I will see you in the next video.